Hey everybody, it's Chris with the Fenix Group. So the project today that we're going to be teaching you how to do is how to refurbish an existing countertop. Doesn't matter if it's laminate, doesn't matter if it's wood, doesn't matter if it's even concrete, which this one is. This is a new way to really add an on-trend look to an existing surface that someone perhaps just doesn't want to take out and deal with all the hassle. So this is actually a countertop that I poured probably 10 years ago, and it was really never maintained very well. So you can see there's some scratches and scuffs and, some areas that are pretty bad looking. So yeah, I'm a little embarrassed, but you know what? We're going to make this thing awesome. So what we're going to show you is how to take our Trans4loor metallic epoxy kit, break it into some small quantities and transform this sort of old sad brown countertop into a really cool pewter gray charcoal work of art. So we're going to get going on that in a second. So stay tuned and enjoy the process. Okay, so we're about to get started. I want to show you what comes with your Trans4loor metallic epoxy kit. So this is the base kit. So every system comes with your base kit, which is a 3.5 gallon bucket where you get a 1 gallon container of pre-tinted part A in black and then your clear part B. So these are mixed super easy, 1-to-1. No guessing, no math work, 1-to-1. You can break it down into small quantities. If you're doing a full batch, what's awesome is this bucket works great just to mix these in and away you go. We always like to mix before you pour in. So if you can get a small mixing drill and put that in there, get these mixed up, great. Otherwise, pour those into separate buckets and then use this as your primary mixing container. So that's the base coat, which we put down after the surface has been prepped. So how are we going to prep the surface? So for this countertop, because there's a little bit of epoxy still left on here, we're going to use an orbital sander. I like to use kind of a medium grit, 80 to 100 grit sandpaper on here. So we're going to profile that surface and then we are going to wipe it down. And when we wipe it down, I always like to use these microfiber cloths and then follow that up with just a little bit of acetone, just to make sure you get the surface completely clear of any of the debris from the sanding process. Once that's done, you're going to do your taping and protection process. So that's really important with these kind of projects because guess what? This stuff does flow. So we're going to make sure that we tape first around all the finish and protective materials. And then we're going to use some poly. We're going to drape that down over the cabinets. We're going to drape that into the sink. We're going to put that around the faucet. We're going to really make sure that as this epoxy flows, which we intended to do, it's not going to trash out any of the other finished materials. Little secret. So you can see here that this is a 2-layer countertop. So one thing that I saw that I think is a really cool idea, we're going to take the box protectors that we got in our kits and we're actually going to cut down and create a little trough under here. And that's going to protect that epoxy from flowing down onto this countertop when we get to our metallic. So when you get your kit, don't throw these away. Mixing, super easy, right? Mixing drill and a paddle. You guys all know about that. For applying the product, I'm going to actually use a foam roller. Some guys and gals will like to use a fiber roller. These things are great because you can actually get them to skid and push across the surface as well as roll. We'll get into that later. The last thing we're going to do is use a heat gun. The heat gun is going to dissipate any potential bubbles that rise to the surface, and we're actually going to move some of the product around with the air from this gun. So we're going to create some really cool natural effects. So when we get into our metallic kit, again, same 3.5 gallon bucket. And now we have, let's see here, this is our part B clear, same as the part B and the base coat, and then our clear part A. Same thing, 1-to-1. You mix these for just 2 minutes. So what I like to do when I'm adding my metallics, which we are selling in a 10-ounce container, I like to pour my part A out and then I will put my concentration in to taste, and then I'll let that soak for at least 45 minutes to an hour. And that's going to really help the metallics absorb into that epoxy so you don't get any comments or starbursts from your color. Never have enough of these, right? So make sure you've got plenty of these on hand when you're doing smaller projects. No sense burning up an entire kit when you're only doing 20 or 30 square feet. So with that, we're going to start with the prep work and get started.
Take an orbital sander and an 80 grit sanding screen, run over the surface. Make sure you get it good and roughened up. This will allow that epoxy to just bond better to your surface. Once you've gone through the whole process of sanding, you'll want to get a rag and water and just clean up all that residue. The Trans4loor Epoxy System is really easy to use. It's a simple 1-to-1 ratio, 1 part A and 1 part B. What you're going to want to do is pour these each into separate containers. Mix them each just for a couple of minutes to make sure they're fully agitated. And once you've done that, you want to pour each of these now into a separate clean container. This will make sure that both parts get completely mixed and you won't have any spots that won't thoroughly agitate into your product. Again, you're going to want to mix the complete part A and part B for 2 minutes using a mixing paddle on a variable speed drill. And at this point, you want to get the product out of the container pretty quickly. When you get it out onto your slab or your surface, it will not set up as fast as it will if you leave it in the mixing container. So simply get the material poured out in a ribbon and then work back and forth. I like to use a foam roller so there's no shedding, and just get one nice consistent layer on the surface. You can see here that after a short period of time, this product is leveling out quite nicely, and we'll let it sit overnight before we come back and do our coat of the metallic epoxy.
Hey everybody, we're back for step 2 of our metallic epoxy countertop project. So our base coat, which was black, has cured overnight. Typically 18 to 24 hours is the window of time that you want to let this stuff sit. So it's hard, got a tiny little tack, perfect for the second coat. So what I've done is I've taken our step 2 kit, which is the part A and part B clear metallic epoxies. And I've taken the part A and I've actually put that into 3 different containers. 32 ounces here, 32 ounces here, and then 16 ounces here. And what I'm gonna do is blend my 2 core colors, which is my slate and gunmetal. They're gonna be kind of a tone-on-tone look, and then I'm gonna have a little bit of an accent with this pearl. So the next step is to take these pigments and put them in this part A, mix them really good, let them sit for maybe about a half an hour, 45 minutes, let them soak in really nice, and then we'll add our part B. Again, 1-to-1, so we're gonna be going 64 ounces, 32 ounces total in the bucket. We'll get those mixed up, and then we're gonna pour it out over the surface, and that's where the fun's gonna begin. Please take note that we've taken extra precaution here to protect all of the cabinets and the floor. This material is gonna be a flood coat, so it's literally gonna come over the edge. I'm gonna roll it, and then it'll just start dripping. So we don't want that landing on the floor at all. And also, if you take a little journey over to the back side here, you can see that I've taken a 1x4 and I've actually screwed that into kind of the backsplash area, which was just sheetrock. And I have this trough here made out of plywood and cardboard. So what that's gonna do is hold that material from dripping down over the lower countertop. That would not be cool, not a good look. So we're gonna set up our mixing station, get these pigments rolling, and then go to the next step.
So I have each of my 3 colors set up in the 3 buckets. For a full kit, you'd want to use 10 ounces of the metallic pigment for a full 2-gallon batch. So you can see here we're making smaller batches, and I'm just putting in approximately 1 to 2 ounces of each color into each bucket. So I'm going to stir these up with the mixing paddle on the drill, and you can see here in these smaller quantities, it's going to be a little bit dusty, so just be aware of that. Wear a safety mask if you're concerned. It's a great idea. And as the pigments are settling in, you can just see that now they're going to soak into that epoxy, and that's the key to making sure that we've got a good uniform color when we go to blend it with our part B.
Okay, so we've just added the metallics, and since I was mixing a small quantity, it actually created a little bit of a dust storm. If you're not thinking ahead and going, okay, I'm excited, I'm gonna start putting my metallics down on the countertop, you're gonna have a little bit of a mess, as exemplified by that. If you zoom in, you can see that is the fine layer of those pigments that have traveled over the surface. So we are just gonna come through and wipe that down and give this just a quick little cleanup before we get started. Also, if you have any little imperfections in your surface, any little tiny pinholes or bubbles, if you're a little bit more concerned about whether those are going to cover or not, rest assured they will, because this is a very thick build. But if you're like me and you're a little bit particular, you can take a little sanding screen or a sanding sponge and just sand those out to make sure everything's perfectly flat. Okay, so we've let our 3 different metallic colors sit in the part A for about half an hour. So now what we're going to do is take the part B clear, and we're going to put the 1-to-1 mix of each one of these into the bucket. We're going to mix each one for 2 minutes, and then we're going to start pouring material out on the countertop. So use a clean one to measure when these buckets get filled with the metallic and the epoxy. It gets a little shady in there. Ideally, you probably want to have clean buckets for each one of these to pour into, but we're going to make this work. I've kind of wiped them down inside. So you're going to simply take your part B. So you want to do your best to really let all of this material come out of the bucket the best you can, so we get a true 1-to-1. And when you're mixing, you don't want to mix really fast. You want to kind of blend into it. Don't move your mixer up and down because that'll make air bubbles in the material. So having a variable speed mixer is a Vero plus. So this will go for 2 minutes. So make sure you've got a stopwatch or somebody keeping track of time for you. If you go longer than that, the material is going to set up faster. If you don't go the full 2 minutes, the product won't be properly mixed. So what you're looking for at the end of the 2 minutes is a lump-free, consistent mixture. And the metallic should be blended out to the point where it's pretty uniform in the bucket.
Okay, so now that we have our first color mixed up, it's safe to leave that in the bucket for our duration of mixing time. So we're going to go through and mix up the remainder of our colors one at a time. It's a good idea just to clean off your mixing paddle, especially when you get to the lighter colors like this pearl, just to make sure we don't contaminate it. Now the fun begins. So what we're going to do is lay out ribbons of color. So we've started off with our gunmetal. We're layering in our midnight blue. And these 2 colors are going to be the predominant colors. So what I'm doing now is taking my foam roller and basically just working this out over the surface. Important here along the edges is just to coax a nice thin bead of material over the edge so that kind of drapes over the edge. And then you can come through and roll that out. And as you can see here, I'm just taking my time and making sure that I get nice consistent coverage. Part of how this material works is it flows if it's at about 30 mils of thickness. So you don't want to spread it out too thin, otherwise you won't get the magic of what this Trans4loor epoxy does when it's at the right thickness. It's literally just going to level itself out. So you can see here, I'm just kind of coaxing out a few lines, really just looking for a very subtle marbling of color here. So now the next step is I'm going to take my pearl color, and I've actually just kind of created a little bit of a spout on my container here, and I'm just going to pour out some thin veins. See, a lot of people do this and they kind of leave those veins pretty predominant. Sometimes that can look a little bit contrived, so I'm going to blend actually some extra color that I had left over in my buckets on top of these, so I get sort of some more in and out veining. So you can see I went from pearl, I threw in a little bit of the gunmetal, and now I'm just putting in some little offshoots of my midnight blue. And I'll just work these over the surface back and forth. Again, this is the fun part. This is the creative side of doing this kind of work.
Okay, so we've got our 3 colors laid out. So you can see we've just kind of done a nice lateral veining process. This will continue to settle out and actually become more mellow. Really over the next 4 to 5 hours is when it'll completely settle out and get glass finish. That's not cool with me. Like, I want to do more, right? So I want this to look more natural, more disturbed, more unpredictable. So I'm going to use air. I'm going to use a hair dryer, maybe a heat gun. Later I might introduce some compressed air, and I'm going to take these veins and kind of push them around and move them a little bit. I don't want anyone to see, oh, you just poured that out. You know, I want this to really look next level. You should too. So that's what we're going to do. Show you this kind of hidden secret technique. There's certainly a lot of folks out there doing it, but if you haven't seen it done before, we're going to give you a really good in-depth look at next level color movement. All right. want to tell you here is, how cool is that, right? Like, we're not artists, we're just concrete guys, but we're doing something really cool here. So most people are going to look at that and go, wait a second, like that doesn't look like an artist did that, because there's way too much going on there. That's awesome. So you don't have to have wild color combinations to pull this off. In fact, subtle is even better. And just kind of a little design detail too. So make sure you bring that product and let it kind of come over the edge. So if you do have a vein that drops off the side, you want that to continue through so it replicates a natural piece of stone. So by the end, I'm gonna have my wife's Infinity Pro Conair hairdryer pretty trashed, but it's worth the effort, right? So we're gonna keep moving along here and enjoy the show. Okay, so we've gone around with the hairdryer and diffused some of our veins, so they're laying out really nice. The product is now starting to skin over, so it's been almost 45 minutes, close to an hour since we've mixed it. So that's kind of the window of time that you have to work with. But if you see some areas that you're looking at and going, you know, there just needs a little bit more action going on, a compressor with an air trigger on it will do the trick. So what I'm gonna do is come over here and carefully just try to blend out this little vein here that's kind of not behaving the way I want. So here we go. So the cool thing about this Trans4loor epoxy is it's gonna heal right back up. So you thought, oh my gosh, you just destroyed that, but that is actually gonna level itself out. You can see it right now. So now we've created a whole different look there. And when you do this, it'll actually bring some of the base layers back up and kind of fold around each other. So I'm just lightly go over most of this and just do a bit of that here and there just to get that final 3D look that we're after. Woo, man, did that turn out good. Wow. Even surprised myself a little bit. Really happy with this. So as you recall, these were just some dingy brown acid stained concrete tops. And in a matter of just probably about 5 or 6 man hours, we've completely transformed these into a really cool on-trend, kind of a natural stone look. So to complete this space, we're gonna paint the brick white, and do some other finish work down here. But believe me, that's easy. You guys can definitely do this. Follow this video, watch the instructions, do some practice panels. You'll be doing this in no time, and another great source of revenue for your company. So thanks a lot.